You were never really part of this family, Elena. Your mother made sure of that before she died. The email from my stepmother landed in my inbox at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. It wasn't even addressed to me directly. It was a forward. She'd sent the original to my brother, Marcus, and my father's business partner, Gerald, with the subject line, "Transition plan removing Elena from board access." I was CC'd like an afterthought, like a vendor being notified their contract had been terminated. I read it twice, not because I didn't understand it. I read it twice because I wanted to memorize every word. In forensic accounting, we have a saying, the first document they send you is never the crime. It's the confession. I screenshot the email, saved it to 3 separate cloud drives, and forwarded it to my personal archive. Then I closed my laptop and stared at the ceiling of my apartment. My phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. "Don't make this weird. It's just business. Dad agrees." Dad agrees. 3 syllables that should have broken me. But here's the thing about forensic accountants: we don't cry over numbers. We follow them. And right now, every number in my father's company was screaming that something was very, very wrong. I got up, made a cup of black coffee, and opened a fresh spreadsheet. Column A, what they took from me. Column B, what they didn't know I had. Column C, what I was going to do about it. I worked until 4 in the morning. By the time the sun came up, column C was 37 rows long. The company was called Whitfield and Associates. My father, Richard Whitfield, built it from a 1-room tax office in Decatur, Georgia, into a regional accounting firm with 42 employees and $6.8 million in annual revenue. He started it the year I was born. My mother used to joke that she and I were his 2 best creations, and he could never decide which one he loved more. She died when I was 11, ovarian cancer. Fast, ruthless, and completely indifferent to the fact that she was the only person in the world who made our house feel like a home. My father remarried 14 months later. Diane was a client. She owned a chain of nail salons and had come in for a tax consultation. She left with a husband, a 4-bedroom house in Buckhead, and a stepson named Marcus, who was 2 years older than me, and had the emotional depth of a parking meter. I don't say that to be cruel. I say it because Marcus once told me, at Thanksgiving dinner, in front of the entire family, that my mother's death was probably for the best because Dad seems happier now. He was 16. I was 14. My father said nothing. That silence was the first entry in a ledger I would carry for 17 years. After my mother died, I became invisible in that house. Not neglected invisible. There's a difference. Neglected children get noticed eventually by a teacher, a neighbor, someone. Invisible children learn to move through rooms without disturbing the air. I learned to cook my own meals by 12, do my own laundry by 13, and file my own taxes by 16. While Marcus got a new BMW for his birthday and a paid internship at the firm every summer, I got a used graphing calculator and a suggestion from Diane that I might want to look into cosmetology school. I didn't look into cosmetology school. I got a full scholarship to Georgia State, double majored in accounting and information systems, passed the CPA exam on my first attempt, and completed my certified fraud examiner credential before I turned 25. I did all of this while working nights at a 2-4-hour diner near campus, because my father told me he couldn't justify paying for my living expenses when Marcus's MBA at Emory was already stretching the budget. Marcus's MBA cost $142,000. My father paid every cent. I know this because I saw the wire transfers 3 years later, when I finally got access to the company's financial records. I joined Whitfield and Associates at 25, not because I was invited, because Gerald, my father's partner, called me directly and said, "Your father needs someone he can trust in the back office. He just doesn't know how to ask." I took the job at $52,000 a year, $30,000 below market rate for someone with my credentials, because I thought it was my chance to finally be seen. To finally matter. For 3 years, I rebuilt the firm's entire financial infrastructure. I modernized the billing system, caught $340,000 in unbilled receivables that had been slipping through the cracks, negotiated new software contracts that saved $87,000 annually, and created a compliance framework that got us through 2 IRS audits without a single finding. My father never mentioned any of this at the annual company dinner. When he gave his speech, he thanked Marcus for carrying the firm into the future and Diane for being the heart of this family. I was sitting in the back row. I clapped along with everyone else. Then, 6 months ago, my father had a stroke. Not a massive one, a thanks in advance. A transient ischemic attack, what doctors call a warning shot. He was in the hospital for 4 days. When he came home, he was slower. His left hand trembled when he held a pen. His speech was slightly slurred in the mornings. The doctor said he needed to reduce stress, step back from the business, rest. Diane saw an opportunity. Within 2 weeks, she had convinced my father to sign a power of attorney granting her and Marcus joint authority over all business decisions. She told him it was temporary just until he recovered. She told him Marcus was ready. She told him I was too young, too emotional, too much like her mother. I know she said this because Gerald told me. He sat across from me at a Waffle House on Ponce de Leon Avenue, stirring his coffee with a plastic spoon, and said, "Elena, I've known your father for 30 years. He's not thinking clearly, and I'm afraid of what they're doing with the money." That was the night I started looking. In forensic accounting, the first rule of fraud detection is this: follow the anomaly. Normal transactions are boring. They match, they balance, they make sense. Fraud lives in the gaps, the rounding errors, the duplicate vendors, the invoices that arrive on weekends. I didn't have official access to the company's bank accounts anymore. Diane had revoked my financial system privileges the same week the power of attorney was signed, claiming it was part of a security update. But she forgot something. She forgot that I was the one who built the system. I still had the admin credentials to the backup server. Not because I'd hidden them. Because nobody had ever thought to ask me how the backups worked. That's the thing about being invisible, people forget what you can see. I started pulling records after midnight, working from my kitchen table, exporting transaction logs into encrypted files on a thumb drive I kept in a hollowed-out book on my shelf. A copy of Little Women, if you're curious. My mother gave it to me when I was 9. She said it was about sisters who had nothing but gave each other everything. I thought it was fitting. It took me 5 weeks to find the first thread. Marcus had created a vendor called Pinnacle Consulting Group. On paper, it was a management consulting firm providing strategic advisory services to Whitfield and Associates. In reality, it was a shell company registered to a P.O. box in Marietta with no employees, no website, and no physical office. Over the past 4 months, Pinnacle Consulting had invoiced the firm for $1.4 million in services. Every invoice was approved by Diane. Every payment was signed off by Marcus. The money flowed from the company's operating account to Pinnacle's account at a regional bank, and then within 48 hours was transferred to a personal brokerage account in Marcus's name. $1.4 million. Siphoned out of a company my father built with his bare hands, while he sat in a recliner in Buckhead, struggling to hold a fork. I didn't stop there. The second thread was the real estate. Diane had convinced my father to transfer the deed of the company's office building appraised at $2.3 million into a family trust. The trust was managed by Diane. The beneficiaries were Diane and Marcus. My name was nowhere on the documents. Neither was my father's, as a beneficiary. He'd signed away the building he'd worked in for 30 years, and the trust was structured so that if he died, it would pass entirely to his wife and stepson. The third thread was the life insurance. My father had a $3 million whole life policy. 6 weeks after the stroke, Diane had the beneficiary changed. The original beneficiary was split equally between Marcus and me. The new beneficiary was the Whitfield family trust, the one Diane controlled. She'd forged the change of beneficiary form. I know this because the signature on the form didn't match my father's post-stroke handwriting. His left hand trembled now. The signature on the form was steady, fluid, practiced. It was Diane's handwriting, dressed up to look like his. I compiled everything. 412 pages of bank records, wire transfers, invoices, shell company filings, trust documents, and handwriting comparisons. I organized them chronologically, cross-referenced every transaction, and wrote a 60-page narrative summary connecting every dot. I saved it all in 3 locations. The thumb drive in Little Women, an encrypted folder on a cloud server registered under a pseudonym, and a sealed envelope I left with Gerald's attorney. Then I waited. The email from Diane, the one removing me from the board, arrived 3 days before the quarterly board meeting. She thought she was delivering a death blow. She thought I would cry, beg, or disappear. She thought I was the same invisible girl who clapped in the back row. She was about to meet someone else. The morning of the board meeting, I got dressed carefully. I chose a navy blazer, white blouse, and my mother's pearl earrings, the ones my father gave her on their 10th anniversary. The ones Diane had offered to keep safe for me after the funeral, and that I'd taken from her jewelry box while she was at a spa weekend in Savannah. I'd been saving them for a moment that mattered. This was it. I arrived at the office early. Gerald was already there. He looked nervous, tugging at his tie, checking his phone. "Are you sure about this?" he asked me. "Gerald," I said. "I've audited the numbers 4 times. The numbers are sure. I'm just delivering the message." The boardroom at Whitfield and Associates had a long mahogany table, 12 leather chairs, and a portrait of my father on the wall painted the year the firm hit $5 million in revenue. He looked strong in that portrait, confident, nothing like the man I'd visited last Sunday, who asked me twice if I'd had lunch and then forgot he'd asked. Marcus arrived at 9:55, 5 minutes before the meeting. He was wearing a new suit, charcoal, tailored, probably $2,000. He had a Mont Blanc pen clipped to his breast pocket and a leather portfolio under his arm. He looked like a man who had already won and was just showing up to accept the trophy. Diane arrived at 9:58, in a cream-colored dress and heels that clicked like a metronome on the hardwood floor. She glanced at me, then away, as if I were a potted plant someone had forgotten to water. "I didn't realize you were still coming to these," she said. "Not quite to me, not quite to anyone. I'm still on the board, Diane, for 2 more days at least." She smiled the way cats smile at birds they haven't caught yet. "Well, enjoy it while it lasts." The other board members filtered in 3 outside directors my father had appointed years ago. Good people, honest people, people who trusted the Whitfield name. Marcus stood up to speak. He had a presentation prepared. 12 slides about strategic restructuring and leadership transition. Slide 4 was titled Streamlining Operations. It was, I realized, a very professional way of saying we're firing half the staff and selling the building. He got to slide 7 before I raised my hand. "Marcus, I have a question about the Pinnacle Consulting invoices." The room went silent. Marcus blinked. "What?" "Pinnacle Consulting Group. They've billed us $1.4 million over the past 4 months. Could you walk the board through what services they've provided?" His jaw tightened. "That's a vendor management issue. It's not relevant to this presentation. It's relevant to the financial health of the company, which is what this meeting is about." I opened my folder. I have copies of all 14 invoices. Each one describes strategic advisory services, but I can't find a single deliverable. No reports, no presentations, no meeting notes. In fact, I can't find any evidence that Pinnacle Consulting has any employees at all. Gerald leaned forward. The outside directors exchanged glances. "Elena, this isn't the time," Diane started. "I also have the corporate filings for Pinnacle Consulting." I slid a packet across the table. It was registered 4 months ago. The registered agent is Marcus Whitfield. The mailing address is a P.O. box. The bank account receives wire transfers from our operating account and then forwards them to a personal brokerage account, also in Marcus's name. Marcus stood up. His chair scraped against the floor. "This is ridiculous. You're trying to sabotage me because you're jealous. You've always been jealous." "I'm not jealous, Marcus. I'm a forensic accountant, and I'm showing the board documented evidence that $1.4 million has been embezzled from this company." I turned to Diane. My voice was calm. "In an audit, you never raise your voice. You let the numbers do the screaming. I also have questions about the Whitfield Family Trust. Specifically, the transfer of the office building a $2.3 million asset into a trust that excludes my father as a beneficiary, and the change of beneficiary form on his life insurance policy, which was filed 6 weeks after his stroke." I placed 2 documents side by side. This is my father's signature before the stroke, and this is the signature on the insurance form. They don't match, but this one does. I placed a 3rd document next to them. This is Diane's signature on the trust documents. The pen pressure, the letter spacing, the way the deed loops, they're identical to the insurance form. Diane's face lost its color. Not all at once. It drained slowly, starting at her forehead, moving down through her cheeks, settling in the white knuckles gripping the edge of the table. That's a coincidence," she whispered. "Maybe. That's for the forensic handwriting expert to determine, and for the district attorney's office, which I've already contacted." The room erupted. Marcus started shouting something about loyalty, about how I was destroying the family. Diane tried to stand, then sat back down, then stood again. One of the outside directors, a retired attorney named Patricia, held up her hand and said, in a voice so quiet it silenced everyone, "Elena, do you have copies for all of us?" "Yes. 412 pages, chronologically organized, every transaction sourced and verified." I distributed the packets. The room went silent again as pages turned. You could hear the paper rustling, the air conditioning humming, and Marcus breathing through his nose like a man trying not to drown. Gerald spoke first. "I'm calling for an emergency vote to suspend Marcus and Diane's operational authority, effective immediately, pending a full independent audit." The vote was unanimous, 4-0. Marcus and Diane abstained, or rather, they didn't vote, because Marcus had knocked his chair over walking out, and Diane was on her phone, presumably calling a lawyer. I stayed in the boardroom after everyone left. I sat at the head of the table, a seat I had never occupied, and looked at my father's portrait on the wall. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel victorious. I felt tired. The kind of tired that lives in your bones, that doesn't go away with sleep, that comes from carrying something heavy for so long that you've forgotten what it feels like to stand up straight. I called my father that evening. It took him 3 rings to answer. "Elena, is that you?" "It's me, Dad. Did you have lunch?" "I did, Dad." There was a pause. Then, in a voice so quiet I almost missed it. Elena, I think I made some mistakes. I closed my eyes. 17 years of invisibility, of silence, of being the daughter who didn't count. 17 years of clapping in the back row. And now, this. 5 words that should have meant everything but instead felt like a door opening to an empty room. I know, Dad. We're going to fix it. The audit took 6 weeks. The independent firm confirmed every finding in my report. Total misappropriated funds. $1.4 million through the shell company. The forged insurance documents were referred to the DA's office. The real estate transfer was challenged in court and ultimately reversed. Marcus's attorney negotiated a plea deal, restitution of the full amount plus 2 years probation and a permanent bar from serving as a corporate officer in the state of Georgia. Diane filed for divorce the day after Marcus's plea was entered. My father didn't fight it. He signed the papers with his trembling left hand and told me I should have listened to Gerald years ago. The company survived. Revenue dropped 15% in the quarter following the scandal, but we retained every major client. Patricia, the retired attorney on our board, told me it was because the clients trusted the Whitfield name, and now they trusted it more, because we'd cleaned our own house. 3 months after the board meeting, I was named managing partner, Gerald insisted. My father cried when he heard not the quiet tears of a man who was proud, but the loud, ugly sobs of a man who realized, too late, how much he had missed. I moved into the corner office, the one with the portrait. I didn't take it down. I left it there as a reminder not of who my father was, but of who he'd almost let them turn him into. On my first day as managing partner, I opened the bottom drawer of the desk. It was empty, except for a single manila envelope with my name on it. Inside was a letter, handwritten, dated the week before my father's stroke. His handwriting was still steady then, still strong. Elena, it read. I know I haven't said this enough, and I know that's not something a letter can fix, but I need you to know, you are the best thing I ever built. Not the firm, not the house. You. I'm sorry it took me this long to put it on paper. Love, Dad. I folded the letter, put it back in the envelope, and placed it in the drawer. Then I closed it. Not because it didn't matter. Because it mattered so much that I needed it somewhere safe. Somewhere only I would know to look. Like a number that doesn't show up on the balance sheet but changes everything about what the company is worth. In forensic accounting, we call that goodwill. You can't see it, you can't touch it, but without it, nothing adds up. If someone is stealing from you right now your money, your time, your peace, your place at the table, don't wait for them to hand it back. They won't. Open the books. Follow the numbers. And when the numbers tell the truth, make sure everyone in the room can hear it. You don't need to shout, you just need to be right.